Let's bring in Senator Tom Cotton, Senate Armed Services Committee member, Senate Judiciary Committee, Senate Economics Committee, Senate Intelligence Committee, also fought in the infantry and went to an Ivy League school. And I believe
Any
you're a lawyer.
committees you're not on?
Right. Also, I know you're a lawyer, so you went to a lot of college, and you know what it's like to go to expensive colleges, too. You tweeted out immediately right after this how your disapproval about this, about the forgiveness of debt. Have you changed your mind?
No, Brian, I think we've only been vindicated now that there's new estimates saying this will cost $500 billion, more than all the spending in their budget-busting bill from earlier this month combined. It's also deeply unfair. Just think about all the Arkansans who never went to college, who got a job, started a small business, say a hair salon or a lawn service business. They're not getting their small business loans paid off. Think about all the people that went to college and worked to put themselves through college, whether they were working as a waiter or as a bartender. Think about the people who went to college and took out loans and paid it back, or who had parents who had saved for them and paid off their education. They are not going to benefit from this. In fact, they are hurt by it because they're now picking up the tab for $500 billion of other people's loans. There's no such thing as loan cancellation or loan forgiveness. It's just a matter of who pays it. Now it's hardworking taxpayers who are going to be paying the bills for this. Yeah. And it's just going to encourage university administrators to raise tuition higher and spend more money on needless jobs like schools with 160 different diversity coordinators. This is going to hurt so many Americans.
Yeah, and as Katie mentioned a moment ago, the HEROES Act is the justification by the Department of Education, according to the Secretary of Education, that they're using. HEROES Act 2003 was to help men and women who served in Afghanistan and Iraq when we were fighting two wars.
Like you.
And so then, after that, Donald Trump said, you know what, we're in a time of emergency with the pandemic, we'll use it at that point. The Biden administration, half the time they're saying there is no COVID to worry about for the most part, but then yesterday they said it's an emergency regarding COVID, and last night the president was up in Rockville, Maryland, not too far from where you're sitting, and there were thousands of people sitting 6 inches from each other. Clearly no COVID standards there, so COVID is over if it's convenient for Joe's victory tour.
Yeah, but it's not over if it's not convenient for his political goals. You know, Steve, I have a new book coming out called Only the Strong. I write about the progressive movement and what it's done to weaken American power, what it's done to trample all over our Constitution. This is really a classic progressive move. Rather than going through the people's elected representatives, the members of Congress, Joe Biden has used the vast powers of the administrative state to reward his political supporters in higher education. This should be done, again, by law. It should not be used old laws that don't apply to these circumstances, that are stretched beyond all recognition. But again, as I explain in my book, Only the Strong, this is a classic progressive move. They don't respect the Constitution. They don't want to use our constitutional system of government. They want to use the vast administrative state they've created over the last century to advance their own political goals and reward their own political supporters.
Yes, Senator, President Joe Biden last night in Rockville was also touting accomplishments that were solely passed by Democrats, not by bipartisan nature with Republicans and Democrats. And take a listen to what he said about MAGA Republicans.
So how extreme are these MAGA Republicans? Just take a look what happened since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. In red states after red state, there's a race to pass the most restrictive abortion limitations imaginable. If the MAGA Republicans win control of the Congress, it won't matter where you live. Women won't have the right to choose anywhere. I respect conservative Republicans. I don't respect these MAGA Republicans. The MAGA Republicans don't just threaten our personal rights and economic security. They're a threat to our very democracy.
Senator, your response?
Well, it's rich for Joe Biden to be talking about threats to our democracy. It's Joe Biden and the Democratic Party who, for instance, refused to accept that Hillary Clinton lost the election in 2016. They used friends and corrupt FBI officials like Jim Comey and Andy McCabe and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page to try to delegitimize President Trump. Just in the last few months, they've turned a blind eye as left-wing agitators were protesting outside the homes of conservative Supreme Court justices. In direct violation of federal law, they which resulted in a lunatic, a Democratic hitman from California, flying to Washington, D.C. to try to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh. Remember last fall when Merrick Garland sicked the feds on parents who went to school boards because they were worried about mask mandates or their kids' curriculum? Joe Biden and the Democratic Party are the ones that have a lot to answer to, violating norms and threatening our traditional democratic standards.
Let alone what he's doing at the border. So I know you fought in Afghanistan, and you know what happened last year, the biggest disaster in American military history, and it was all the president's idea. As all the commanders came out and said, listen, I told them this was going to be bad, it was worse. Now there's this story out that Abdul Rahman al-Ghori, who was at Bagram Air Base and released from prison, sat around Abbey Gate for 2 days. The CIA said, this is the guy, he wants trouble, he's going to be the bomber. We did not kill him. So he ended up blowing himself up and killing 13 Americans and injuring hundreds more, let alone Afghanis. We will not name him as the killer. What is your reaction to this administration seemingly to get a pass and not to name the assassin and allow him to do his job, even though the CIA identified him 2 days before?
Well, Brian, it's another example of President Biden's disgraceful weakness that is threatening us not just in Afghanistan, but all around the world. Today is the one-year anniversary of the tragic suicide bombing in Afghanistan that killed 13 of our brave troops, hundreds of innocent civilians. One of those Marines had ties to Arkansas, Taylor Hoover. I remember meeting his family last year at the memorial service for him. I want to offer my prayers, my condolences to all those we lost and their families and their loved ones. This is a tragedy, but it was also more than a tragedy, Brian. As you point out, it was a strategic disorder or disaster of the first order. As I explain in my book, Only the Strong, there's a reason why Vladimir Putin began building up troops on Ukraine's border just a few weeks after the debacle in Afghanistan. While Xi Jinping thinks he can fire missiles all around Taiwan and get away with it, while the Ayatollahs in Iran think that they can send operatives to America to assassinate former U.S. government officials, or why one almost finally did fulfill the Ayatollah's fatwa against Salman Rushdie, nearly killing him a few weeks ago. Right. It all goes back to Joe Biden and the way he projects weakness. That weakness was on display most notably in Afghanistan, and this latest story about refusing to identify this potential bomber is just another example of how they want to bury the Afghanistan debacle in history. Unfortunately, it's going to be living with us for as long as Joe Biden is president.
Yeah, the CIA said, don't kill him. We're just going to watch him. You mentioned the person from Arkansas who was killed 1 year ago today. There were 12 others. One of them was Lance Corporal Dylan Marola from Rancho Cucamonga in California. We spoke to his mother just about a half an hour ago, Senator, and she too frustrated at the way that this administration ordered the withdrawal. Watch this.
It's very frustrating to know that they had options at this point to not allow something like this to go on. They did have options. The withdrawal process was completely botched. I think if they had done it the right way and had it organized, you don't remove your troops from Afghanistan and then put more children back in there.
And, you know, Senator, Joe Biden's own generals told him, you know, leave at least 2,500 people there, and then you'll have NATO forces as well. But he said, nope, everybody's got to go, with tragic consequences.
Yes, Steve, my heart just breaks for those families that lost loved ones a year ago today, because this was a preventable attack. If the Biden administration had been more organized, if had a better coherent plan, if Joe Biden had listened to those warnings, we would not have had to rush thousands of troops back into Afghanistan to evacuate all those American citizens. Remember, that's why they were there. These were more troops than we had had in Afghanistan for many months because of the debacle of the way Joe Biden executed this withdrawal, by closing Bagram Air Base, by refusing to provide air support for the Afghan army, by withdrawing civilian mechanics who were there to keep the Afghan Air Force itself flying. Mm-hmm. These are a long series of mistakes that led to that tragic suicide bombing a year ago.
I remember how many empty planes left Bagram Air Base with nobody aboard. Yet we left thousands behind, and veterans had to rally, leave their jobs to get them out. And this administration wants to just to move on. We cannot allow that to happen.
Yeah, Senator, the nightmare lives on for the families who are affected and, of course, for the country. And you've written an op-ed at foxnews.com, more on this topic. And thank you so much for your time this morning, Senator Tom Cotton.
Thank you all.